Get the clock synchronized.
You do battery in it.
Digital is the way to go.
That's why we all sit there and look at our phones still. Just to make it perfect.
Right. All right, so I will call this meeting of the Missouri Valley Complex Committee to order. Before we get into the business, want to remind everybody or ask everybody to please use the microphones and make sure they're glowing green before you speak. It becomes difficult to go back and do minutes and reference materials and such, even though the owl picks up quite a bit without the voices. Now, I told Steve, I could probably sit in the next county and you guys can hear me, but for sure try to use the microphones. All right, so we called the meeting to order. Steve, can you call the roll?
McCall.
Here.
Hi.
Here.
Marty.
Here.
Woodville.
Here.
Peters. Here. Olson. Here. Strelitzek.
Here.
Fairlow, Hilton Digger. And Martinez are absent. And Commissioner Munson is here. Julie is also out of town. You have quorum. That's correct.
Thank you, Steve. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the March 19th and the April 1st, which was a unscheduled special meeting. The minutes of both of those meetings. If there are any additions or corrections to those, I would take them now, and if none, I believe I can motion and approve both of those at the same time. All right, no corrections or additions, approval to approve both March 19th and April 1st minutes.
I would move to approve the March 19 and April 1st
Second,
minutes.
Second.
okay, Steve, do we have to call the roll on that one, or can this auditory or? Okay, sorry, it's been a day, guys. All approval of approving, all in support of approving the March 19th and April 1st minutes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, minutes are approved. Are there any additions, changes to the agenda? Seeing as none, silence I'll take as consensus, and moving on to, you've got a big list, Commissioner Munson.
Thank God I'm a politician and I can talk. Thank you, Chair. Now, I have to remember what happened on April 7th to try to.
Well, I can remind you.
Had a few meetings since then. So at the April 7th, commission meeting, we did, both, Chair LaCoe and the group from the Ag and Equestrian Center, presented to the commission. I'm gonna have a problem talking just like you.
It's raining.
It's raining,
Yeah,
okay.
we're gonna go with that.
We did get approval from the Burley County Commission to move forward with not only recognizing the Ag and Equestrian group, but solidifying that group, that chunk of land is set aside for that project. We talked about the zoning, we talked a little bit about and you're gonna hear next about the plat, coming forward. We did talk a little bit about the cost or how we were gonna pay for the road, and that kind of got sideways a little bit with the commission, so we were able to move on and get away from that subject, because until we really know how the plat is gonna go through and how the design of everything is gonna happen, and we know what the city's truly gonna require, we've got a good idea, but until we know, let's just keep moving forward with the options that we can. So the May 5th meeting, we did bring in front of the commission both the hay and the ag land lease. The ag land lease was approved that they would operate this year with putting a cover crop in the fall. The lease that is being collected is a lot less than prior years, but they have a lot of money invested in the seed and turning it into the land that we wished at the end of the deal, so it was a good move for all of us to do that. The hay land, we didn't get a bid, but we had an interested party who happens to be the same people that have been doing it for the last several years, so we reached out to them to continue on with that. So that was approved as well. Wetland mitigation, you'll hear a little bit more about it. shortly, but that did get approved, for putting out for bid. We did then receive bids. I was very excited with the bids. The low bid that came in, from Moore Engineering was, in my opinion, about a third of what I thought we were gonna be paying. So that was a good thing. We did choose to take that out of operational funds rather than Missouri Valley Complex funds. Cause I didn't have any snow hardly to remove last year, so I have a little extra money in that budget. So that's the direction that we went through there. Next on the list is discussion from the rodeo club, for some equipment out there. I don't know if I ever saw a final, Kevin, from Dave on the cost of those.
Yeah, I sent, I don't have it in front of me, but he did send something.
Yeah. If I recall from conversations, the numbers were going to be minimal for doing the gates. I remember seeing an email on the electrical, but I'm gonna hold off on the electrical. Their request was to bring additional 50 amp circuits out there. We need to get Capital Electric involved to find out what's available power coming to the facility before we can start adding 50 amp circuits to what's out there. So I know I'm waiting for some of that. The cost of putting the outlets out there wasn't much, couple $1,000. So that was an easy thing to do, but I have to make sure we have enough power out there to actually, we could install the circuits, but can we hook them up, you know? But if I remember right, the gates were minimal and I will get that approved, you know, as long as this group is okay with those 2 extra gates going up on the outdoor rodeo. Like I said, the cost was minimal, so I'm not too concerned about that. The last item on my list is a review of the budget. If you folks have anything that you feel needs to be on the budget, and I apologize, I didn't make a copy of that. But let me know if last year's budget seemed to work out all right financially for us. We've got budgeted, you know, whenever the sewer comes through, we'll redo the road after that. But I have money budgeted for that. We have money for crack sealing. We have available dollars for other things. So you guys as a group need to look at projects for 26 and let me know wishes and wants so that we can start putting that together. We will meet as a budget committee in the middle of June. So if I could get some ideas, email me of your thoughts of your projects of things that you would like so that I can start getting bids put together on some of those things.
So,
That's it for me.
all right, no, it's not good. I got a couple questions. If I may, it relates to the Central Dakota Rodeo Club. It was just those 2 items? Was there a third?
It was a gate on each side and electrical.
Okay,
And so electrical, we're gonna hold a little bit, but the gates, I think, were minimal.
Sheriff Laco, Commissioner Munson said, I've got those prices here, so the 2 electrical, or the gates, I'm sorry, was. I'm gonna use round numbers, it was about 300 for one and about 230 for the other one. And then the electrical, they're estimating is about $1,000, but was waiting to get an official quote.
okay.
Yeah.
So that then, is it anticipated would come out of the operating budget?
Yes, I have line items in the operating budget for those kinds of stuff.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to understand the chain of command, and this will come in my second question. Those types of items aren't necessarily required to come before this group to make then a formal approval to the commission because you already have a operating budget that you've approved from last year?
The request to spend the money should still come to this group first. And then brought to me at that point. If it's under $1,000, I have authority to be able to do that without getting it to the county commission. In fact, I've seen other commissioners approve up to 5, but that's not something I would do. I would want the rest of the commission to know, but for these small items on the gates, not a concern, that's in my budget.
Okay,
But the electrical now, the last time I talked to Dave, Capital Electric hadn't done the research to find out if we can even add power. I don't know how much draw is on that pole or is on that transformer. So doesn't make sense to put outlets out there if you can't hook up to them.
Right, so my kind of related follow-up to that is, can you speak to the Burley County Commission's agenda item on Monday regarding the proposal to purchase the land out at the complex? You knew that was coming.
Oh, absolutely. Best way to say this, I was not a very happy camper when I saw it on the proposed agenda for Wednesday, since I had not been consulted about it at all prior to me seeing it on the agenda. I had a strong conversation with our auditor to make sure that that doesn't happen again, and I think he got a strong conversation on Monday about the same.
I would agree.
So there is a realtor that is looking at purchasing land out there. And I would agree with Commissioner Bittner that the use is not necessarily. Doesn't matter what the use is. I can't make it a decision based on what the use is. But they have a client that would like to purchase a portion of the Missouri Valley Complex. Having no other information than that's what was presented to us on Monday night. I don't know if he wants an acre. I don't know if he wants 50. I don't know if he wants the whole complex. So without having any other information, I mean, it's pretty tough to know. You all, if you watched the meeting, you heard, I mean, Commissioner Balkin's not wrong in the fact that if we could trade land square foot for square foot outside the ETA, we would have a lot less headaches with the city of Bismarck. Now, the flip side of that is that takes us away from the residents, puts us a little more in a rural setting, and I'm not sure that's right or wrong. Again, without really having more information, you know what I know,
Right,
which is 1% of what we should know. Mr. Bittner was accurate. You wanna pay me a lot of money, more than what it's worth, so I can buy more somewhere else? I'm okay with that too, but again, our purpose of Missouri Valley Complex, in my opinion, having it as close to the city limits or within the city limits that we have it, serves more residents that way. You know, if we were outside the ETA, we could probably house animals out there rather than it being an apartment or a motel would be an apartment. I don't know if that's what we wanted. You know, but that's again, more information will come to you as I get it, to see what the thought is. I mean, if he wanted 15 acres down in the lowlands that he has to delineate and has to pay the Ducks Unlimited for, you know, the credits to use that land that we can't use anyway. Maybe that's not a bad thing. I don't know, but I don't know what he wants. I don't know, like I said, how much.
correct. I think we're both aligned in the frustrations of how that came to light. I think you know exactly how I felt on Friday morning at 8 AM.
Frustration.
Well, that.
Minor way that I would. put it.
So I just wanted to offer, if I could, a couple of comments sitting as from a chair position of the committee, and then I would also love to have that discussion here. Anybody should feel the need. I appreciated the thoughtful conversation by the commission that night about exploring all options, and at least a couple of the commissioners noted that the land is for the public.
Mhm.
That this land has been set aside for public use, and that if there is an exchange of land or some sort of money, ultimately that decision comes before the commission. However, I share concerns of at least a couple of others that reached out to me, that having that chain of command compromised, and B, knowing that that could be a consideration of the commission, that makes it very difficult for projects and lessees, user agreement owners, for lack of a better term, to make plans for in the future.
Right,
I would like to ask as our liaison to ensure that, or give me the opportunity to represent the interests of the committee if they so choose, that this needs to be established and decided upon now and for in the future. Because we can't have multi-million dollar programs, and I'll speak because nobody from Buckstop Junction is here. You know, there's a big consideration on their part of their already investment out there, and it would be a huge disservice to the work that this committee's put in. At the very least, but at a much larger scale, what has already been done, that if there is that possibility that on a whim with a carrot that has a big dollar sign attached to it, that could all go out the window.
I can't imagine that this is going to be a 30-day conversation,
That's what scares me.
you know? I do not see this as something that will turn that fast.
No, but that's the part that scares me.
Right.
Because if this conversation continues 6 months, 5 years down the road, that makes it a very uncertain environment for which any of the user groups out there can proceed forward.
I can tell you that since that meeting, I have heard zero. From the auditor or from the realtor or from anybody on what their intent is.
But the seed has now been planted, and it looked very enticing to at least several members on the commission that night. I don't know what the committee's thoughts are, but I lean towards a formal request from this committee to go before the commission to re-solidify the chain of command on those things. And B, number two, to have some sort of agreement or resolution, whatever it might be, that land is what it is and that's where it's going to stay. Or the intent for the commission to go out and find a trader or a buyer or something before the rug gets pulled out from underneath any one of the user groups.
So I have a question, because I'll admit to not watching Bismarck City meetings. I probably should. Is the zoning done for public? Yes. Okay, now when we zoned it, we zoned all of the land.
Correct.
Okay. So my reasoning personally for getting it zoned public is to prevent them being the commissioners, whoever they might be at any point in time, from being able to sell to a private entity without having to rezone it. So like all these years, if it had been public, it would have, I hoped, would have prevented some of what went down. You know, Echo Sanitation sold and those things and Northwest Tire. And yes, that got us money, but they got rid of usable land. Whatever, it's all over old. So I mean, that's where, I mean, like, that's the other thing. I mean, it is public, what?
Well, they can sell it all
Yeah, and then
Or
somebody
partial.
can come back into it and change.
and
it.
rezone it, right?
Right. Well, no, you're right, but I don't see where any guarantees are even from a
Agreed.
particular commission. Because in a year, I don't know when we elect another 2 people, in 26, right?
Next November,
Three.
3.
So they would start in January 27th. So I mean, you're making an agreement with who's there and who might vote yes today, but they might be gone. And I guess that's just the truth of anything with the government, but
When you get
it
elected.
bothered,
officials,
like the whole situation is weird.
Yeah.
That it's not a dead conversation. That's I just don't understand after all these years, it's just not. Just, no, that's not what's gonna happen kind of deal.
Agreed. Alan?
Do we have, do the groups out there have copies of their leases?
They should.
Motocross, I don't know, you guys don't have anything.
Motocross should, Buckstop should.
I know.
So they're
Buckstop-
probably protected under those
Yes.
from that being sold, correct?
Which we requested those a few times and still haven't seen them.
You have not?
I have not seen any of the user agreements out there.
I've got old copies, but I'll work on getting some new copies. The latest ones.
The other question I had was, maybe you guys from Swenson and Hagan can answer this, being that it is zone public, what's the process going forward for selling that? If they did sell
You'd have to go back to the same process and rezone.
it, rezone it?
Yep.
Madam Chair, there, if I might add, or add, offer this, is that sale of public land is not as easy as it may appear, and somebody just walking in and offering to just buy it.
Right.
It has to go to a resolution of the board, it has to go to a public appraisal, it has to get, it has to be a minimum dollar amount, and then it's open, wide open for that. So it takes quite a process to go through a public hearing and the whole work, so.
I do agree, and I'm aware and I appreciate that, but I also have to lean on my background of my past industry, where a 8-year process still creates an incredible amount of uncertainty by which to dedicate to go forward with a business or building or investment.
Yep.
So while the process may be long and arduous, it isn't fully off the table, and the conversation, the interest level that I may or may not perceive accurately watching the meeting on Monday, would make me a little cautious
Yep.
about investing in property out there. That's just my personal standpoint.
Madam Chair, I think you're absolutely correct, that if that was the motion of the commission to move forward with even investigating or researching a sale, it would put all the projects out there on that, but nothing would happen. So,
And I know that there's an invite for that particular offer to come forward, and that hasn't yet.
And how do we move forward even with what they're doing? With the uncertainty of that, I mean, how do we? What's our path forward? Are they gonna do all that work for nothing? I mean, that's where I'm,
And if I could just add on to that, so how would it work if that's built? It's under construction and it's built. And they have horses and tracks and all sorts of stuff, and somebody wants to come buy it. It's possible, right?
Plausible,
We're
maybe
gonna-
not, but
They've
it's.
put 10 million bucks in, we're gonna offer you 20 million, you might say, yep, we're moving. I mean, so all that's possible, so there really is no safeguard on that at all
Unfortunately, no.
with public land.
Yep.
right,
So. If anything's possible for the right amount of money. And if everybody says yes, at the time when they're elected, the different people.
So we go back to my initial request that at the very least, as our liaison, I hope that you carry forward what we have expressed around this table as being concerned about any of the future offers, whether they materialize or not.
Absolutely. You were gonna get that anyway.
I know, but I really wanted it on the record.
One more question, so. If he doesn't agree to sell the horse facility for. Cost of 10 million for 20 million bucks, then does the sale go through? In other words, does everybody have to agree, or is there a majority, you know, everybody around here says we're selling and he's the only holdout, but he's got all the money involved?
He owns-
I'm just saying, when these things get built,
Right.
if and when they do, it looks like they will. What prevents that? Nothing, or does he have to agree to that, or does that group, I'm saying, does that group have to agree? We've got 10 million bucks here, we're not selling for 20 million, and we say, yes, you are, or we can't do that, the board. Or this city commission, how does that work?
Ken?
I was just gonna say, I think that it's all gonna go back to the lease that you have on that piece of property. Like Kate was asking about the leases that everybody has. I think that to protect yourself, you get a lease of some sort, some length that's going to protect you, so that those don't happen from.
More like a railroad lease than a 99-year lease or something, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But without having real ownership. The county still owns that land regardless of the lease,
They
and
do.
any contract.
But with a
can be
99-year
vacated.
lease,
Yeah.
none of us are gonna care, kids won't care.
Yeah.
Things change in 99 years, if you get something like that, but that was my question, because that's a risky type of an investment. if you don't have something like that, but like, as I said, if it's a lease. And you get a long enough one and everybody's comfortable with it. They can entertain whatever they like.
Right.
Right.
If I say, no, I have a 99-year lease, no matter how good it is, I'm sticking with this.
Right.
Then you do that.
Well, and it's, the park district has a lease with the county for the Joanne Hetzel Memorial Building,
It's a neat,
you know.
75 years left. on
Yeah.
it.
So. Interesting.
Yeah, it was more than the first time.
Another fun meeting.
Oh, wait till tonight.
Can I ask a related but unrelated question? I don't know a lot about rodeo, so you know what, this board, we're supposed to have a high school rodeo person. And I've read some of their minutes, cause they're online and stuff, to see like, hey, was there supposed to be someone? Why didn't they show up? So who is this Central Dakota Rodeo Club? And maybe like they'd be awesome to work with and have cool ideas, and they should be here instead
The high school.
of the high school. Who
So
are they?
I've talked to the National Director of the High School Association about this. In a conversation actually probably last week. And they're just an organization, and how their organization works, they're pretty much just programming. Because the way the High School Rodeo Association works is these different towns have their own rodeo committees that put on the rodeos and host them. And the North Dakota High School Rodeo Association has a membership that comes and competes at those places. So Central Dakota is a committee in Bismarck that hosts a junior high rodeo and a high school rodeo every year. I think Ryan Reel's probably the person you talk to on that. Which I served on the high school board with Ryan, and they're kind of the same thing. I mean, they're kind of programming now, if and when we get the, I should say when. We get the Egg and Equestrian Center built. I would say that Ryan would probably be somebody that would probably be on our committee. And possibly, if there is a seat at the table and he wants to be on it, we can do it if that's what the group chooses, but.
Basically, and this is not on apples to apples, but as close as I can get, is that would be like there being a rummage sale or a wedding or something that leases out the Joanne Hetzel building. This rodeo associate or committee, as I understand it, just leases. So, cause I asked, we talked about kind of the same thing in that realm.
Yeah, we've talked about that the last 2-3 months, you know, so. Do we even have the high school rodeo association on this board, because they're more of a user group, not your programming group, they're not a full-time member of the facility. And so we might need to change our bylaws here to change that,
Might have to amend them.
amend them, yeah, because doesn't make sense to have just a user group, if you will.
Right, that is what your at-large
Yep. Right,
members on the committee
they cover that,
should.
yeah. Didn't beat me up yet?
I do this all day.
And I said,
Don't challenge.
yeah, I should know better than that. And I certainly apologize to this group, because that was so far out of left field. That should have been a conversation with me, with you here, long before it ever went to the commission.
But you can't have that conversation with us unless you know about it.
Exactly, and
That
that,
might have been planned that way.
I don't, honestly, I will defend Mark in that case. I don't think so.
Good.
Yeah, I didn't get that sense either.
No, he really felt he was bringing it to the commission Monday night as, hey, guys, this is something that's happened.
Unfortunately, it happened 2 months ago.
Right, and should have included me 2 months ago for that. So I really think Mark was trying to do the right thing by bringing it to the commission. But when things like that come out of left field without the portfolio holder knowing, it was tough for me to stomach.
Yeah.
in that
Commissioner
way.
Woodcox was very adamant about where he sat in it as well.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I know Marie and Ellen both have. Go ahead.
Oh, my question relates to the last item, this emailing you budget wishes.
Yeah.
That would be in the operation budget.
Yes,
So like this. I'm gonna use the example of the sign. So like, it'd be really cool to have a better programmable sign. Is that something I would email you, or is that something that's so expensive? You're thinking more like these $1,000 little.
no, but I think
else.
I might not make that the 26 budget. But it certainly would be something for 27,
Okay,
you know, because it is an improvement to the facility. And back in the day, we've looked at that several different times, you know, changing that out. You're looking at 75 to 100 grand. 4 or 5 years ago, when I got bids done for Commissioner Jones. So that, but it is certainly an item that you should include in your wish list. We even talked about a new sign on the northwest corner, you know, of the property. Again, that's an item that we should put in our wish list of items, you know. I mean, everything from crack sealing to. I mean, that's the operational budget of the facility, and I need to know your thoughts on that.
Ellen,
On that same note, planning dollars. I mean, is that, we need to come in with some, if we need the planning and development or anything like that, money for that?
We talked the other day about stage 3 of their proposal, you know, that's not in my budget.
Okay.
So we need to get that in the 26 budget for sure. I didn't send you an email, but I'm asking for you to read it, you know. They sent me a new budget for stage 3, because that is definitely something we have to have in the budget.
Okay, and that's, your budget's due when?
June 12th.
Thank you.
any other items for Commissioner Munson?
You know, I'm okay here.
No, we can hang out all day.
Good, bad, indifferent, I'm okay.
Sincerely, thank you, Commissioner.
Well-
You've taken some hits for us, and that's very much appreciated.
You know, I believe in this. I believe in this committee and I believe in the complex, and to see this grow to what it should have been 25 years ago. You know, I can only apologize for not getting done sooner, but I believe in having this facility for our residents, and I can't thank you guys enough for being here to make sure it happens. So I'm okay with the hits.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, next item on the agenda, Swenson and Hagan. Who do we get today? Okay.
See, they brought backup, I didn't.
Good afternoon, Chair LeCoe and fellow commissioners. Took just a few notes and just kind of had a few thoughts with the discussion that was just previously had for just some things to chew on. And I'll work them backwards from how they came in. The sign item, city, just as a point of interest, does have a sign ordinance. And so if you're looking for sign modifications or some new sign
I got you.
locations, there is a process.
We might know a guy.
I might know a guy. So, just point that out, yeah, that we are in the EPA and part of that. Another thing that, was talked a little bit about was with the committee members. In some of our previous conversations, you know, we had conversations that were like, the committee members are kind of members that have leases or have functions in the facility, right? And so, as it all relates to city and county and how you're viewed, you guys have a stake in this property, and you guys are beholden to the vision and the process to allow functions and development for the facility. So if you have somebody that comes in that wants to use a component of the facility, then that necessarily may not mean that is a committee member, right? Because they're just a end user, they're not the facility development part of it, right? So just a few thoughts that I had on that. The plat in the zoning. The zoning is done, and the zoning is with the P-Public. And the reason that everybody sees that type of zoning as an appropriate zoning is because of who and what you are. So that definition of you guys are carrying that torch to manage, to develop, and to oversee the things that happen in this. The city and the county, you know, view you as that mechanism to allow for the infrastructure development and the management and the future options that go forward with the facility. And so there is that comfort level that the city of Bismarck has when we talk about that plating mechanism. And then that plating mechanism is that they know that there's a user here, a public user. So if there's something that could happen in the future, let's say part of the property were to be sold, the city may view this a little differently. Because they know that the acreage in the facility has oversight and use by one party. They're not conflicting parties possibly. And so when you start talking about infrastructure and transportation needs and how you operate and all those discussions that happen through that plating process about the city being comfortable with how to handle the plat, how to handle right-of-ways and easements and facilities and the things that they would provide other people. So a person comes in, buys the property, that may require that to be rezoned. But also that may change that relationship of how that facility kind of gets handled, right? And so, for example, when we talk about road networks through here, the part of their conversation was they felt comfortable that you guys kind of know best about how you want to manage your facility. So we don't need an overarching envelope of road networks through here that have to be all publicly dedicated. We don't necessarily need all of these transportation plans and things like that, because they kind of know what you guys are looking at and what you're doing. If a user comes in here and until it's defined, that may add additional questions or concerns from the city's part. So that then how you handle that relationship with a user, that's not the committee, right? Not the county, and how that melds in with the rest of the facility, that can be something that adds some complexity to this whole thing, right? So somebody came in and say they wanted to buy a piece of property, put a data center in here. City would view that very differently. They would view you very differently as well. And how you operate your facility and how that operation coincides with another operation next to it. They felt really good about the uses and the things that you guys want to do here because of the approximation or non-approximation to all the residential uses and the transportation network that's here and all those other things, right? You have a lot of good things, which is why probably there's people possibly looking at the property because it's not around housing. It's got very good transportation networks to move people in and out. You know, the noise thing might not be as big of an issue. And those are some of the things that we talked about. You know, if we have a concert out on this facility, you know, what better place to have it? Why? Because you're not around housing. And you got a good network to get people in and out. And oh, by the way, the city has some networks there to provide services. So moving something out into the county adds different layers of complexity to a facility that you guys could put up ultimately down the road, right? So in the county, you've got some sanitary sewer issues, you've got water supply issues, how do you provide firefighting capabilities? So it's not all green pastures, you know, on the other side of the fence. There are some other things that come with that, so. We have had a lot of good discussions with the city about the plat. We wanted to move the plat forward to get in front of them to have our plat, meetings that we get scheduled through the city staff. So that we can get the plat closer once we get the wetland delineations taken care of, so. The numbers came back really good. I was quite happy too with the numbers. I think that's a economical, thing, and so, Auditor Splonskowski had sent me the contract to take a look at, and I will, respond back to him after this meeting. I wanted to talk to you first before I responded back, but, contract looks appropriate. It references all the things it looks like it should, so, we did have a pre-plat meeting or a pre-design meeting with, Moore Engineering here this week, and they would like to start their desktop review, where they'll start looking at all their paper type data first and get kind of a game plan put together. And so we had that meeting on Monday, and they would like to do that within the next 2 weeks. They want to start that process. So we're gonna try to get them this contract so they can get under contract and get that executed. After that review, they will move forward to getting some folks here in town on the ground. And then they will start that delineating process. So the piece that is up for consideration and approval in this contract is to get a delineation, put together an AD and ask to the Corps for a jurisdictional determination. And get a response officially from the court. Once they have all this done, they would be meeting with us in this group and discuss their findings. And we have an opportunity then to get some knowledge about what kind of wetlands they are, you know, how valuable they are, you know, they're classified to certain levels, and what possible mitigative measures there might be, you know, sometimes it's a 1-to-1 if we destroy wetlands for replacements, it's a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1. And so then at that time, there can be this discussion about, okay, if we've got an impact of X acres, here's our options. We can avoid them, we can mitigate them, or we can go to Ducks with their program and ask if they have available credits that we could do a in-kind purchase. Then, depending on which way everybody decides is the best avenue to go, if we do nothing and avoid them, we would have to modify the plat. And so we've had the initial discussions with the city to get their comments. So we kind of know what's going on from their perspective, and we'll deal with the plat in the wetlands as that data comes in. So we either move the plat around and avoid them with roadways, or if it's mitigated, we gotta come up with a plan. We would have to ask more for a cost, which we had indicated in that proposal that depending on what option was selected, there may be an additional ask for compensation to go either the Ducks route or the mitigative route. And so we would get that from them, start developing that mitigative plan, work that through the Corps, and then when it's appropriate, bring that plat in and start to move that forward. Now, if it's a Ducks type of a avenue, then we would have to reach out to Ducks, find out the availability, and then get that letter, if they have the availability, back to them, make payments. Still needs a Corps permit, but it's a much shorter time for that. And then payments can be made, the permit can be given, and off and moving, and then the plat, of course, would move forward as well. There's kind of 3 prongs with that approach, and it really depends on the data that we get back and the impact that needs, so. That's kind of where the plat's at right now. Does anyone have any questions?
Is there something that we should be asking?
Just making sure everybody's
You
educated.
have all kinds of questions for me. You should have some for Jason.
Yeah, but he speaks a whole different language.
It's just so that you know, as we move forward, if people are asking or thinking like, why isn't the plat moving forward? Or why are we seem to be stalled out? It's necessarily not that we don't want to move. It's, we've got now data that we'll have to get, evaluate, and then get feedback from everybody to get a course of action.
Good framing. I do appreciate that. Summing it up in that way, so.
Yeah, so after a decision is made, the plat can move forward then. And we would be slowly rolling forward to go through P and Z and then ultimately city commission. But it would be at a time after the submittal of any permitting would go and us getting some feedback from the court. Okay? So they all kind of have a little different pace to them, but as we go back and review what we've talked about in the past, a lot of what we've talked about is to try to get the plat wrapped up by the end of the year, right? So that way you guys can make decisions and move forward.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Steve.
question for Commissioner Munson. Would it be appropriate for this group to pass a motion affirming the decision for the $7,000 on the mitigation contract? Or supporting it, or however?
It's not gonna hurt, the commission approved it already. I mean, this group did approve moving forward with that. You know, and the Burley County Commission then finalized it, so I don't know if we need to, but. Well, I don't think so.
Anything else from the committee or? Alright. Excellent.
Right, very good. If you guys have any questions, let me know.
You guys so much easier than Commissioner Munson.
Oh. Thank you.
Okay, number 7, committee discussions. I believe that there have been already discussions this meeting surrounding these 2 agenda items here. The established review of the Missouri Valley Complex Committee, the form, function, and operations. And then there's also a discussion point for committee to review current leases and discuss development and operating development agreements. Steve, is there something you'd like to elaborate on that, on these points?
Yes, Madam Chair, I guess the conversations that even it relates back to some of the things today, or Commissioner Munson bringing up and processes and you know, when we developed the committee, it was more about formation and representation and starting and getting through this, but we're almost 1.5 years into the operation. We talked about the leases and future of the lease or development operating agreements to the complex and to the county. You know, that needs to be resolved as new leases would come forward and new operating agreements. And who are they with? Is it the complex or the county commission? So there's some mechanics here that we need to really address. The other thing is processes of budgeting, the review of the budget. Does the budget come back to the committee now and to move it forward? So it puts some operating procedures as this committee grows. It's similar to the water board or the weed board. I mean, there's other committees that have been around a lot longer, and I only use a couple as an example. But, you know, to get the process so everybody, and so the next people come on the committee or the next appointments, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we know what's going. It's like the mitigation that came from here, went to the county commission, you know, they handled it from there. The other committees, as I see it, also have a staff liaison. They have somebody in the county office that is the liaison, provides the paperwork, does all those kinds of things. So what's the future of that? And so that there's that connection back into the county office all the time as a county committee as it moves forward. So more of a planning session, you know, where do we go with this group? And I think it even helps out contracted services with engineering firms and everybody, who's gonna solicit contracts? Do we have a budget for that? And then Alan brings up a good point, is they're planning money, you know, down the road. The groups are kind of working on their own, trying to do their own seeking favors and friends and asking for favors and getting drawings done and things. So the racetrack, you know, what's the next step in planning that site, getting some concepts done, the fair and festival grounds? You know, how do we pay for those things? We'll run out of freebies after a while with, pretty soon the architects and drawers in town won't open the door for us when we come in, because we'll always put it up free, so. We need some of those things talked about, and how do we get them into the budget? And be able to do it, so it's a planning session, a discussion, operation, purpose, function of the group now is probably the biggest thing. How do we function, process things?
I have a question, just a couple of things on yours. First, let's start with the budget. So you guys are gonna turn your preliminary ones in on the 13th of June, no big deal. Everybody gets then a chance to see everybody else's business kind of deal, right? Then on June 18th, will you bring the operating budget for the complex? Make sure like that's on our agenda?
Yep.
So we can review that, cause I mean, like the budget doesn't get set for months from now.
Well, in July, we will.
In July, you have to have it at its max.
Right.
Cause you can lower it, but you
Right.
can't, right, so anyway, so like that would be a thing, I guess, as you as the secretary, that, and then if you could email his budget. The worksheet.
Right.
2 pages, however many it is now, to us, you know, that, whatever was presented on June 13th. Then we'll have to make probably a decision on June 18th if we wanted to have input, because once again, in July, it has to be at its max. Doesn't mean you won't get it cut, you know, in August or September, but whatever. So I think that's really important. The other thing I found interesting that you said, I don't know if I've ever thought about, is who is the lease agreements with? So like yours right now for like the Joanne Hetzel and the little plot of land, and I don't know if you get a parking lot with that, is with the county. But 75 years is done. I assume Buck Stop 75 years or 90 years with the county. So I mean, but you had referenced using like having the complex. That's not something we would do. I mean, it has to be with the county, correct?
Well, I think
What
that's
do you
one
think?
of the questions, it's a
Interesting.
good one, that the development of a lease, you know, as the next project comes back, asking for a lease for their site for development and operation. Is it a agreement? But it should really come to this group first, so that everybody on the committee understands what's happening, how it functions, how it works in relationship to everybody else. And then, but ultimately, it would go to the county commission as I see it, but this is a pass through. You know, this group understands everything that's going on out there, as it works for everybody in common, then it goes to finally to the final approval. And so it's just a process steps.
In the very beginning, probably before we were ever seated, wasn't there a flow chart, or was it all, you know, how flow charts really easy to follow, but, or was it all words?
No, there was a flow
It was a
chart.
flow
There was
chart,
flow
yeah,
chart
I-
From the groups to the committee.
Yeah.
To the commission. land.
So, I mean,
So,
once again, in June, is that something, are you the one that made it? You would have access to it? Or I
Yeah,
can
we've
dig in
got
their
it.
email,
We've
we
got
can
it.
find it,
yeah,
but
we've got it, and I think that's
Yeah,
to
that's
get
the
back
start.
to that and understanding,
Yeah.
now putting in more of the definition into the flow chart of what happens at what steps and what comes to this group to move up. Like, the land thing, you know, that's. I think that probably should have come here for discussion and then go to the county commission.
well, cause like I'm thinking realistically. This meeting, we should have had what you were gonna present in
For the
June.
budget.
For the budget,
Yeah.
I mean, so like, but it's like, we're still getting going,
Mhm.
so I totally agree with that, to have some timelines, so I think that should be on our agenda for the 18th.
Yeah, and I think in defense
And have that sent out.
of the county and the budgeting process, Monday night was the first discussion of just appointing the budget committee, the county's
Yeah.
budget committee, so. We have to fall into some of their scheduling as well. So, but if we know we have to present or develop a budget, we know then. In April, May to start talking about budget, and we can get the numbers ready for the commissioner liaison to move it forward from this committee. Like the Water Resource Board or the Weed Board or County Park Board or anybody else. We get into that same sequence. everybody else.
Other feedback around the table.
The other thing is, and I don't know if you'd ask for clarification, but the idea of removing the high school rodeo from this group.
Yeah.
How do you do that? We just move, or we ask him in June to take it to the commissioners to do it? Whatever. I mean,
I think it's-
if someone wants to think about that and figure that out, we can
Yeah.
figure out how to do that.
Yeah,
Clear that
that's
up.
really the discussion
Yeah.
that needs to happen.
And it'll
is-
fix quorum counts and things like
Well,
that.
Yeah.
A couple ways to answer it this way would be that you drop the name or identifying the group, you keep the position. So that you go to 11. It was set up as 11 members and not 10. And so you just keep the position, and then if there's some other group comes in or another organization that has a stake, you have a spot for them at the table. So there's some ownership there. So there's some ways to work that mechanics, but I would keep the 11th position. I don't want to give that up. But I think the other question, there's response earlier was that it's some of those mechanics. That now we can become more formalized and develop the mechanics after a year and a half of operation.
I feel that the order of operations here might be best, starting in June, on the June 18th meeting, if we can have access to all of the leases.
I already sent the email.
Thank you. Get access to those leases and review those as agreement, review them ahead of time, but discuss anything that needs to be discussed regarding those leases. Because I think in large part, those leases and agreements are going to drive the conversation as to form and function, who sits on the committee, if there is any changes to be made. As I understand it, if there is changes to be made, that goes along the same process as everything else we've done. We discuss it here, we would vote on it, take it to the commission, so on and so forth. You know, for timing wise, months go quickly. But you know, I feel that we need to have any recommendations that we want to have to the commission ready by October, November, because they'll open up their appointments for December to go forward. So that's going to come quite quickly. But I believe that, yeah, you know, June 18th, if we can at least take a look at those leases and kind of see where there might be some anomalies. I'm not saying that we can make changes. But to at least have it all the cards on the table, I guess.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, two things. One is the operation, if you relate it to the county park board, which is by statute is the county park board, but the others function that once a budget is set and being part of the budget or development, this group should be able to operate autonomously and know within the budget, the plan is there, the projects are there, the budget is there to do it. So even with contracts such as we want to do site planning or zoning, or we want to do engineering work out there, we know we have a budget to hire an engineer. So the group hires that we don't have to keep going back to county commission, other than that budget. And that's the operating permission then, is the budget that's developed and approved by the county. So you should be able to operate. We're sending Commissioner Munson back every month with something, you know, for budget, or we have to go and ask for $15. This is the way it is. And so that's part of that process. So that becomes an operating group then, you know, you operate that complex within the budget permissions that you have. So the other thing we said, we originally developed this committee, there is an operating outline, you know, that's there, kind of process it. But that can be more, it can be cleaned up to a point where it provides more of that operation. But we know we're gonna have appointments, and that's part of the county thing. The second part would be, what information do you want at the meetings, you know, because if we could have provided it, or I copied it, or whatever, would have been the summary of the bids received, you know, for the wetlands, so you'd have recognized all 4 bids that came in and what were the guidelines and what was the thing, the other summary stuff that you could get to you. We would have all that information here and not have to watch the movie again and try and figure it out, or look at the budget or the county's agenda packet of 279 pages.
It's all the chain of command.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anything that happens out there should go through here.
Yeah.
And we'll fill out.
Okay.
So everybody's aware of it, understand.
Even if we don't have a decision point to make on the item, it should come through this committee.
That's the way it was formalized.
Right.
Is that, under that understanding.
Any further discussions on that, other than proposing that be 2 agenda items or 3, for June 18th, the budget discussion and then that form and function and lease review. Okay, any other business? Any other business?
You gotta go in front of the commission for, I don't remember what it was now, you said, it was earlier in the meeting,
The gates and stuff, the rodeo club stuff?
no, because that's. No.
I don't believe I'm going in front of the commission. I don't really want to, so. But no, if there's something that does need to be brought up, for sure, but no, I think most of the discussion point was just reestablishing and establishing that chain of command is respected. Our next meeting is Wednesday, June 18th, same room, same time. And unless I hear objections, this meeting will stand adjourned. Thanks, everyone.